Were you one of the people back in 2021 that was overly hyped when EA and DICE announced that Battlefield would be going back to a more modern setting? Hell, I know I was one of those. While the first initial trailer was every Battlefield fan's wet dream, we all know by this point that DICE knows one thing, and that's how to make a kick ass looking trailer. What we didn't know was that the game itself was going to be a half baked mess that was going to damage the reputation of not just Battlefield, but DICE themselves. It was such a departure from the previous games that made the series so great. While this might sound like a broken record with most of DICE's games, but 2042 is a vastly better game than what it was at launch, and that has been the case for their past two or three games, it seems like, which is unfortunate. The momentum did seem like it was swinging upwards in favor of 2042 with the overall player counts increasing, and the game lasted 7 seasons, three more than what was originally planned. But just this past year, DICE announced that Season 7 of 2042 was in fact going to be the last. This ended the 3 year journey that this game had went through, and I mention all of this because the game that we're going to be talking about today is Delta Force Hawk Ops. Now, over the past couple weeks, you might have seen a few streams, impressions, and or videos, and holy shit, at first it took me a solid second to realize that this wasn't Battlefield 2042. Stylistically, you can see where a lot of the influences for the game was coming from, as well as some of the more recent entries into the Modern Warfare franchise, as like the maps, the presentation, all these games have the influences on Delta Force Hawk Ops, and it's pretty apparent here. While this alpha test for Delta Force is only a small slice of what the full game hopes to offer, I think if they can position themselves right with the gap that Battlefield has left in this genre, they could see some success down the road. Quick little show plug, if you do enjoy the video, consider dropping a like and or subscribing to catch all my reviews and previews coming in the future. So what is Delta Force? Delta Force is a lot like Battlefield 2042's in more ways than one. Unlike 2042's beta, Delta Force has actually ran pretty well for me during my period of play. I'm on an RTX 4080 and an i7 13700K with all the settings at their max values, and I didn't run into any major issues other than a few stutters in the game, so hopefully a good sign for the full release. Speaking of the full release, there isn't currently an end date for the alpha, but I've heard some rumblings that it could end sometime at the start of September. But until then, they've decided to add some new content like a couple new game modes and maps, as well as a few new gear items. So from a content standpoint, the game's looking to be faring pretty well if you're doing content drops in an alpha. Another similarity that this game has to 2042 is that you have your different character kits that you can choose from, each having their own sort of abilities that sets them apart from one another. You have your main assault guy that I like to play a little bit of. He can fire this little volley of rockets out of his wrist, and then he has an ultimate ability that's this exo-powered skeleton that gives him increased mobility. Then you have one of the recon characters that has this bow, and you can fire an arrow that will actually reveal enemies within a radius or until the arrow is destroyed. I'll talk a little bit more about the character kits here later on, but at its core, this game is going to be a 32v32 attack and defend mode with game modes like Breakthrough in 2042, basically two objectives, and then you push on out through the entire sections of the maps, completing objectives progressively. They also added in a new Conquest mode here this past week, which sees the full map opened up, allowing you to try to hold different objectives. It's Conquest. If you've played Battlefield, you know what it is. And the similarities to Battlefield don't stop there because each of the characters that you can choose from, the kits that they have help set them apart from one another. I briefly touched on this, but there's 6 total characters that you can unlock. There might be 7 at the time of this video. And these certain characters only have access to a certain amount of weapons, instead of having access to the whole assortment of weapons. And I think this is done to help you play some type of role, or at least try to fit into one. Plus, not many people are going to be running around as a medic sniper, right? Currently in the alpha, there are only 2 maps in the multiplayer side and 3 separate maps in the extraction mode. The multiplayer maps that you can play have different variations in biomes, like a desert city side. Then my personal favorite being a map that if you're attacking, it sees you infiltrating from the water side on a boat as the enemies pepper you from the shoreline. Yeah, it's a small moment, but it's felt more Battlefield than some of the past entries have, and I'll take it. There are talks of them adding another map and or mode within the alpha again, which I've said is awesome considering it's just in an alpha period. But there are other modes for people to try out other than the conquest or the breakthrough modes. Another component to this game is going to be the extraction shooter side of the game, which is a genre that has popped up over the last couple of years, with plenty of clones and imitators flooding the landscape. Tarkov is and has been the king of the genre for some time. Call of Duty tried to take a stab at it last year with DMZ, but abandoned that project after the first year. Hunt the Showdown is another game that I've heard is making some waves, but personally haven't got around to checking. Then we have Marathon from Bungie, which we haven't seen much from that. We've only seen a trailer. We don't even know what the hell it's going to be. But that is the next big one coming. Then out of nowhere, we have Delta Force. The point that I'm trying to make here is that all the other games that I'm mentioning are solely focused around the extraction genre, it seems like. Whereas here in Delta Force, it looks to be a component of the whole package that'll be on offer. The extraction shooter mode in this game is actually quite enjoyable because while still being that type of mode, I didn't find it to be as hardcore or as punishing as Tarkov would be. I like that there's missions and objectives for you to complete in the map, allowing you to rank up your base of operations. Just like Tarkov, this place allows you to increase your stash space, weapon recovery rate, basically all the same things that Tarkov did with its base features are things that you're going to be able to do here within Delta Force's mode. I'm sure this mode alone is going to attract plenty of people to this game who might be a little burnout on Tarkov or just want to try something new. I found a lot of fun just trying to load in solo, posting up with a sniper rifle, taking out people from a distance. I know that's kind of scummy, but I just had some fun with it. Yeah, I died a couple times, but you live and you learn. Whether you want to progress and complete all the mission objectives, or look around for some better loot, or maybe you want to take out the world boss, they all have different varieties and options. And like I said, there's 3 maps now available, so there's plenty to do within that mode within the alpha. The third and final mode is actually one that's not accessible during the alpha period, but it's actually going to be a campaign mode that is a remake of an old Delta Force game called Black Hawk Down. While I haven't played the game, I have seen the movie directed by Ridley Scott, and I heard it's supposed to kind of base the plot or kind of be similar with that. And by the way, if you haven't looked at the cast for the Black Hawk Down movie, go ahead and look it up. You got Tom Hardy, Ewan McGregor, Josh Hartnett, Michael Shannon. There's a fuckload of people in there that you would not see in a movie like that today. If that campaign mode can just retell that story, or at least some version of it, I'll be happy. This campaign mode is going to be a paid offering, while the other 2 previously mentioned modes are going to be free to play. To compare this game to Battlefield 2042 isn't a bad thing at all, and by all means, I think it's a little bit of compliment slash flattery in the sense that this game could serve as a nice holdover until the next mainline game in the Battlefield franchise is released, which is rumored to be sometime in 2025. I feel like I say this a lot, but from what I've played, the foundation of Delta Force is solid, but it's what they do with the post game launch content that really matters. They've mentioned that they are actually already working on the seasonal content, and I don't know how far along they are, but that's a good sign to come for the full release. There are a few things that I do take a little bit of issue on, and one of them is the way that you actually can level up your weapons. So, yes, you get XP when you use your weapons, either by defeating opponents or capturing objectives, but there's actually another way that you can level up your weapon, and it's actually completing daily and weekly challenges that net you a token. This token, depending on the rarity, can rank up your weapon's level 2 to 3 times, possibly per token. While this is just the alpha and they're handing them out like candy, I think it could be just that they want to allow you to try some of the weapons, and I could see it turning into an issue if this is something that you can purchase from the in game item shop. Editor's note, they did put out a blog post slash bulletin post that said there will be no pay to win elements. I don't know if that pertains to the extraction side or the weapon leveling thing, so that is still TBD. Also, the actual character movement at times in the multiplayer can seem a little clunky, and more often than not, I found myself dying because I was climbing a ladder or trying to mantle. The parachute animation also feels really weird. I'm not sure if speeding up the animations for these could help alleviate some issues, but like I said, the foundation's there. Just some small tweaks overall to the actual feel of the game that I think could go a great way. I do want to give a little shout out to the weapon animations and reloads because I've noticed those all look really cool and there's like a lot of detail. There's one on this bullpup rifle where he flips it over and kind of puts the mag in. The inspect is actually really cool too. He'll pop the bullet out, catch it on the side, hold it, look it back, put it in. But it's all the small, minute details that I like. I've also seen the topic of bots and how they fill lobbies in some of the games, and I really don't see this as anything different because just like 2042, they have the same system in place where if a bot is in your match but a real player joins, that bot will go ahead and get removed and the player will then replace them. So as long as they clearly state that that is a bot, I'm totally fine with having them around to sort of fill out and pad out some lobbies. I know that there is a select ranked mode that is meant for players versus players only with minimal or no bots. That wasn't something I dove too much into, but maybe I will in the full release. There's only so much that you can gather from an alpha test, and while this alpha test has lasted nearly 2.5 weeks, I do think it's a good indication of what Delta Force is trying to do, and it could work if they position themselves correctly for the long run. Is this going to topple the Battlefield franchise and win over the FPS market? No, not even close. but what it has the chance to do is seize the moment when the Battlefield franchise is down and or lacking content. A lot of the Battlefield fans might be bummed out by the news that 2042 is no longer getting support as the teams move on over to the next installment. There might be a few fans that want to dive into something like Battlefield, and with the similarities that the two games have, one could hop in, find some similarities, and then start maybe finding some enjoyment. On the flip side, you have the extraction shooter side of the game that seeks to pull in the more hardcore shooter audience that want the thrill of an extraction game. While this does seem to be a little more on the lax side in the sense that this genre is one that is popular and it seems like it's getting a new game almost every month, but it remains to be seen if any of these games can topple the head start that Tarkov has, even after they royally fucked up with the premium edition fiasco a couple months ago. Then you have the campaign side of things that looks to capture the magic and the cinematic feel of the Ridley Scott movie while still telling its own story. How the actual full release shapes up is something that we'll have to check back at a later date, but with the closed beta currently still running, you can request access on Steam, maybe jump in, get a few games of multiplayer, or try your hand at the extraction shooter side of things. Drop a like on the video, let me know what you think below. Have you been playing Delta Force Hawk Ops? What's your favorite mode? What have you been using? Have you played any of the older Delta Force games? And if you did make it this far, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day, and this has been my preview of Delta Force Hawk Ops.
Stay alert. It's not over yet. Make a swift transition to the extraction point. Remember, the mission is only complete upon successful extraction. That's your mission. Good luck, operator.